Boys and girls, and welcome to the Concession Stand, brought to you by the KB Radio Network. This is the review of Disney's new adaptation of one of their theme park attractions, Haunted Mansion. And this is the second attempt from Disney to have a film adaptation of Haunted Mansion. 20 years later, the first attempt, The Haunted Mansion, came out in 2003, and it starred the great Eddie Murphy. And it wasn't the best of movies. It's been a while since I've seen it. I think 20 years. I think I've seen it when it first came out, and that was the only time I watched it. It didn't do anything for me. But we fast forward 20 years later, and we get a new adaptation, and this is coming from director Justin Simien, and it stars Lakeith Stanfield, Tiffany Haddish, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, Rosario Dawson, Dan Levy, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Jared Leto. And this was a film that initially I wasn't excited for. I'm just gonna be plain straight up and honest with you. I wasn't really preparing myself to tear down the doors of my local theater to go watch this movie. It just didn't grab me the first trailer, but the second trailer kind of did. And I was like, well, this does look interesting. This looks funny. I'll see when it gets closer to the release date. So as we grew closer and closer and closer, I started to get a little excited for it. And honestly, it was the second trailer, because that's when I found out it was filmed here in New Orleans, and I have a soft spot for that. You know, being a 504 boy, I have a soft spot in my heart for films that are filmed here, and especially when it's showcased in a way that really, how can I put it, really shows the culture of New Orleans, that really has the meat of New Orleans in the film, rather than is a film just filmed down here, you know. But when it's a film that's based in New Orleans and you feel New Orleans in it, I'm all in. And this film does a good job of doing that. The premise of Haunted Mansion goes as such. Gabby, who is portrayed by Rosario Dawson, and Travis, her son, portrayed by Chase Dillon, move into a mansion only to find that it is haunted. To combat the spirits, they hire a former paranormal investigator, portrayed by Lakeith Stanfield, turned tour guide, a priest, portrayed by Owen Wilson, a psychic, portrayed by Tiffany Haddish, and a college history professor, portrayed by the great Danny DeVito. This is an interesting film, and it's interesting because I went into it not expecting a lot. I really wasn't expecting to be scared out of my pants, you know, because it's a Disney movie. So I wasn't expecting gore and, you know, that type of dread that is associated with your typical horror films of these days and times. So I was more looking forward to the comedy aspect of it. And I must say, this film was very entertaining. Let's start with the good. The good here, Lakeith Stanfield, the star of this film. When I found out Lakeith Stanfield was starring in this, I was kind of taken aback, because this is kind of a different film for Lakeith Stanfield. You know, I'm like, in a Disney movie? And I love Lakeith Stanfield. We all know him from Atlanta, from Judas and the Black Messiah, Sorry to Bother You, and many other projects. Lakeith Stanfield is an awesome actor. I've grown to love him. I've grown to love his style of acting. And my God, in this movie, he did an excellent job. It feels good to see him in a leading role like this, to lead this type of film. And he's dealing with so much in this movie. This is non-spoilers. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it is very deep. This movie went deeper than I expected it to go, because this movie deals with grief. It deals with social anxiety. It went places that I wasn't expecting this type of movie to go. This movie in particular to go, and it wasn't supposed to pull on my heartstrings the way it did, and it really did. And it was spearheaded by Lakeith Stanfield. I mean, this is an Academy Award nominated actor, and so he can act, and he acted his behind off. It's like at one point I was like, man, do he realize he's in a Disney movie? He's not supposed to be giving us this type of meat. He is acting his behind off here, but he was also funny when he needed to be funny. He was goofy when he needed to be goofy. He really committed 110% here, and I enjoyed it immensely. I enjoyed his performance the most out of all of these talented actors and actresses in this film. Tiffany Haddish, I make no bones about it. I'm not the biggest Tiffany Haddish fan. I don't dislike her. You know, I think she is what she is. But normally Tiffany Haddish is one note with me. You know, that's the way I look at it. And I could be looking at it wrong. But it's the same character in every movie, and it's kind of, it gets old quick. But I enjoyed her in here. I really did. She really did a good job in this film. Now, I've seen her in dramatic roles. She has twisted it up a little bit on us, and she did a decent job in those films. But here, as far as her comedy is concerned, that's what I'm focusing on. Her comedy was different. It just hit different, and it was a nice change of pace in the film, and I enjoyed her performance. Owen Wilson as Father Kent. I liked his role. He wasn't what you expected him to be. He's not your conventional priest. I would say that much. Danny DeVito was nice, nice touch, a nice addition to the cast. And one of the standouts here is the young actor Chase Dillon, who plays Travis, the son of Gabby, and he did an awesome job. There was a scene towards the end of this movie where he had me about to start, you know, sniffing, you know, holding, fighting some tears. I was like, oh my, all right, this is getting heavy. I wasn't expecting this, but it was a good thing. It was a good thing. I really loved his performance. At one point, I thought he was the star of the film. You know, he was really carrying this movie for a portion of it, and I got no bones about it there. My other positives, I gotta go with the production design. The production design was beautiful. It really felt like a haunted mansion. You know, it felt claustrophobic at times. You know, it when it needed to be, but it also felt at a wide scope when it needed to be. It was just a freaky place to be in. The atmosphere, I guess to summarize it, the atmosphere really played a good part, and I thought they did a good job there. The cinematography was outstanding. I thought the film looked great. You know, it was shot really well. You know, it was shot really well. That's between the cinematographer and Justin Simien. I did mention earlier, Justin Simien, he directed Dear White People from a few years ago. And this was like only the second time I've seen his work. And it's a big step from Dear White People to Haunted Mansion, dealing with special effects in this big ensemble cast. But he did a really good job. I love the way he shot this film with the close-ups when it was the heavy emotional scenes, and you know, the wide shots with the heightened fear and all this here. He really did a good job shooting this film. The Showcase of New Orleans. Now, it's some bias here, of course. I'm gonna give it a little bias here, but I'm giving it in a sense of I don't get to see New Orleans on screen in the way this film depicted New Orleans. And I loved it because it felt like New Orleans. I felt like this was home. You know, I had to go research to see if Justin Simeon was from New Orleans. You know, he's not, by the way, but he's from Houston, which isn't too far away. Maybe he comes here. He came here for on the weekends or something. I don't know, but he captured the essence of New Orleans here. From the start of this film, when we're introduced to Lakeith Stanfield's character, and we get to see Jackson Square and, you know, other parts of the city, the French Quarter, and all this here. We see a second line from a funeral and stuff like that. These are things that happen here. You know, if you're not from here, all that was real, and it felt real, and it felt like home to me. I embraced it. It just felt good to see New Orleans shown in its true form, and I appreciated that to the highest degree. Moving on to the negatives. My negatives, I'm gonna start off with Rosario Dawson, and it wasn't her acting. It was the way that character was written. The character of Gabby. It just did not connect with me. Her character did. She was just there. You know, it wasn't a big role for her. Now, granted, she's not the quote unquote star of the film, but I didn't really connect with her character. She did nothing. She did absolutely nothing. And I was like, what was the point of her character other than the fact that she's the mother of Travis? I just didn't get that character. There were some plot points or some rules that were established that later on, those rules were broken, and I didn't understand what was going on. This is slight spoilers, so if you don't want to hear nothing that's going on in the film, it's not spoiling anything, but it's a plot point. You've been warned, so I'm gonna talk about it for about 2 minutes here. It was a nice, cool way, the way they established how everybody had to stay at this mansion. You know, because if the house was haunted, you'd just leave. You know, and they were like, okay, we out. And they established that little portion of it, but they had to come back, and they gave a reason for that, and it was a pretty decent reason. I actually liked the reason. Basically, if you step foot in the house and you leave, the ghost will follow you and haunt you wherever you go, forcing you to come back to the mansion. That's the rule that was established. I'm like, okay, that makes sense, you know, because otherwise this movie would be over in 10 minutes. And so they had to find a way to get him back in the mansion. All right, cool. But throughout the film, after they've left the house and they're forced to come back, you know, throughout the film, they're free to go wherever else. Throughout this movie, they go to the store, they go back to their individual homes. They do have to come back. You know, young Travis, he goes to school and comes home from school. It's not like he's getting haunted at school. It's like, well, what's the rules? What are the rules? I thought the rule is you cannot leave unless you're going to get haunted. You know, we see characters at different locations and they're not being haunted. You know? It just didn't make sense to me. And I was like, well, what was the purpose? What was the point of establishing this rule and we're not going to abide by it? That is my biggest bugaboo throughout this whole film. My other flaw was the special effects. The special effects looked good. It's going to come off as crazy. Just bear with me. The special effects looked good. But there was so much. It was so much. I didn't see any practical effects. I didn't see any makeup effects, you know? It was all CGI. And I think they relied on CGI a little too much here. Just a tad. Just a tad. It would have been nice to see practical ghosts, with the makeup and all that. There was none of that. I didn't see that. I guess they did do it and just overlapped it with CGI. I'm assuming, but the CGI was just a lot. And it kind of took me out for a couple of scenes in the film. Speaking of that, the film was a tad bit long. This movie was 2 hours long, and it feels like I'm saying this a lot lately, but this movie could have been shortened for about 20 minutes. They could have easily shortened this movie, and you know, I'm not going to be able to pinpoint exactly what scene and they could have cut, or a couple of scenes they could have shaved down, and without going into spoilers and whatnot. But they could have easily shaved about 20 minutes off this movie, if not 30, and you still would have got the same effect, probably even a better effect from it. And I say that because once we got to about an hour and a half into this movie, I'm looking around and I see people kind of, you can tell when people are starting to get antsy, ready to go. And at my screening, there was some people getting kind of antsy, like, okay, are they gonna wrap this up? Because for about a 15 to 20 minute period, it felt like we was on a merry-go-round. We weren't going nowhere with the story, and they could have cut some of that in the middle there. But those are my only negatives. I think overall, it is a fun, entertaining film, and at the end of the day, I feel this is for the kids. Not particularly for my demographic. I think this is for younger audiences, and I believe children will love this movie. I think they're going to enjoy this. This would be a nice introduction for a kid who haven't seen horror films, or not allowed to watch horror films. I think parents can take their kids to see this movie. Ghost paranormal film like this. This is an actual good film for kids, and I believe that's who it's aimed for, and it's great. And I really, really appreciate, as I said before, the tackling of grief, dealing with social anxiety. Real big part of this movie. That is a driving point in this plot. Those two elements, and that worked. That worked perfectly, and it even helped with the outcome of this film. And for that reason, this movie gets a passing grade. That particular plot point was driven home perfectly. Other than the other little things that I had a problem with, it's not the end of the world. It's still an enjoyable time in the theater. I do think, one more negative, this isn't for the film. I think this is Disney's fault. I don't think it should have came out in late July. This movie should have came out around Halloween. This was a perfect little Halloween movie. Now, 9 times out of 10, this is probably going to drop on Disney Plus by Halloween time, so I guess that'll be perfect for that. But it would have been nice to have a Halloween movie in the theaters from Disney. This is a perfect little Halloween film, and I think it will become one of those Halloween classics at the end of the day. I really do. It's really good. It is well made. Just a few hiccups there, but no film is perfect. Well, that's a lie. There are a few, but in no shape, form, or fashion was I expecting this film to be perfect. But it was an enjoyable time. Haunted Mansion from Disney gets a letter grade of a C+. I think it is an enjoyable film, entertaining film, funny film, and has a couple of scares that kind of shocked me, kind of surprised me. It wasn't scary like you got to cover your hands, cover your face with your hands type, like, oh my God, jumping in the chairs. But it was there was some scenes there that was kind of creepy and stuff. So it did the job. It did its job. C plus for Haunted Mansion. I would like to know, are you planning to check out Haunted Mansion, or have you checked it out? I would like to know how you felt about it. Do you think this is superior to the Eddie Murphy film from 20 years ago? I think it demolishes that. It wipes the floor with that. So, of course, that's just my opinion. I would like to know yours. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on Twitter or X, whatever it's called, at KB Radio Network. And on other social media platforms, just look up the KB Radio Network. Don't forget that we're on YouTube as well. Look for the channel, the KB Radio Network channel. Subscribe and give this video a like. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the Concession Stand here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of Disney's Haunted Mansion, available in theaters this Friday, July the 28th. Want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.